Hello, everybody. We're letting everyone get connected to our audio. And thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar for CalTPA Single Subject and World Languages for our transition for next year. I'm Heather Kennedy. I'm one of our consultants here in performance assessment. And while we're doing our introductions, we would very much appreciate if you could put your name and your affiliation in our chat. And while we're doing that, Lori can go ahead and bring up our slide deck for us. So thank you again for joining us to talk about our transition webinar for the 25-26 academic year. And we'll go ahead and start off with introductions. So as I said, I'm Heather Kennedy. I'm one of the consultants with performance assessment. And I don't spend quite as much time with this group because I mostly am working with our education specialist group and on the development of the literacy performance assessment. But it's very nice to be with you all this afternoon. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Julie.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Julie Holmes. I'm one of the consultants on the performance assessment team. I'm typically supporting the Gen Ed, and I'm also supporting the new PK3 math cycle field test. And so I will turn it over to Marissa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, couldn't click that audio unmute button. Marissa Luna Lopez, and I'm a consultant here with the performance assessment team, supporting education specialists, general education, and TPAs and the CalAPA. We also have, I saw Juliet here. If you want to say hello, Juliet. I thought I did. Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I'm having some connectivity issues. Thanks so much for being here today. My name is Juliet Wallleitner, and I'm a special consultant with the credentialing. Hanging out a lot with the performance assessment team. So thanks for being here.
All right, thank you. Turn it back over to Julie.
And I'd just like to mention that our good colleague Zoltan Sarda could not be with us today, and as well as our colleague Jack Boss, who does a lot of our research and data analysis for us. So I will send it back to you, Heather.
Thank you. And we do have some of our colleagues from Evaluation Systems here with us to answer any technical questions. So I'll let Lori introduce herself.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, my name is Lori Thornley. I'm a program manager with Evaluation Systems. We're the technical contractor, as you all know, for the CalTPA and other exams. I'm glad to be here today, and I will hand it over to my colleague, Xavier.
Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xavier Webb. I'm Senior Area Director with the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson, and as Lori mentioned, we're the technical contractor that supports the development and operations of the performance assessments and exams in California. Happy to be here with you today and look forward to helping out with any questions you might have.
Thank you. So we have our agenda up on the screen for today, and you can see that we'll be talking about the changes that are on the horizon for 25-26. Specifically, we'll dive into an overview of what is to come for Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 for single subject and world languages. And then we'll be giving you some resources. We do have a Google Drive folder set up for you, and I'm putting that link in the chat for you right now with some documents. We will be adding a copy of this presentation at the conclusion of today's presentation, so you can look for that sometime in the next day or so. We do have in there for you our acceptable supports. We have a sample backwards planning document that is modeled off of what we've been doing in our work with our pilot and field tests in the last 2 years, specifically with literacy and our math cycles. We do have our recent PSA that was just issued about the guidance for the next year for all institutions that use CalTPA. The CalTPA as an embedded assessment, and then an article from Edutopia on how to use video to help teachers improve. And then, as I said, a copy of this presentation will be placed in there sometime in the next day. And we do have our meeting norms. So if you could just take a moment to make sure to review these. We do have a pretty large group here today, and we will have designated question periods throughout today's presentation. You are welcome to put your questions in the chat as they come to mind as we're going through things, and we'll make sure to address those when we get to those points in the presentation. Or when we get to those points in the presentation, you can also unmute to ask your questions at that point in time. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Marissa.
Okay, so this webinar, this session is going to be all about what's coming in the 25-26 academic year, and to align cycle 1 and cycle 2 in the single subject and world language space with some of the changes and things that we've learned from the pilot and the field tests of the cycle 1 and cycle 2 updates for both education specialists, multiple subject, and the general education multiple subject and PK3 world. So I'm jumping ahead, but next slide, please. So again, apologies. I probably should look at the slides that are on the screen rather than the ones that I have just on my own screen. But yeah, so we're wanting to make sure that there's alignment between the education specialist versions, multiple subjects versions, and PK3 is a new version that's coming in, and it's all updates based on feedback from both candidates and programs through the field test and the pilot. Next slide, please. All right. So this part has been a little bit tricky, and there are a lot of different situations that have come to light for a lot of different candidates who are in the process of completing program. But right now, at this time, single subject and world language candidates who attempt CalTPA 1 or cycles 1 and 2 by July 3rd of 2025 and do not pass or receive some type of condition code that makes their submission unscorable, they may resubmit using the current documents, the version 7 documents, until June 30th, 2026. So because of these updates, we recognize that they're big updates and they're changes, so someone won't have to redo their whole submission. If they have submitted by July 3rd, 2025 and have not completed the CalTPA for any reason, also, you know, the next bullet there is they complete and pass only one of the two. So a single subject candidate completed cycle 1 and is working on cycle 2, didn't quite finish it by that July 3rd cutoff date for this year, they can continue working on that version and submit it until June 30th of 2026. Okay. Now we recognize that some candidates may not know that whether they pass or not by that July 3rd date. If they're submitting on that July 3rd date, they will be able to register for the previous version of the test when they re-register because they either did not complete or, you know, a condition code that made it unscorable, something of that nature. But candidates who do not pass the 2024-2025 version 7 by June 30th deadline, they will be required to transition to the 26-27 version of the single subject world language CalTPA. Now, because they're single subject and world language, they are completing their teacher performance area in their single subject area. So if you have a candidate I know, and everyone is going to have, I have this one candidate, but if you have a candidate who completes single subject, let's just say, math, cycle 1, and then stops out a program and then comes back and they complete the 24-25 version, they can do the next version. They can do the 25-26 version of cycle 2. So they're able to complete their sequence as long as they stay in their same area. We can't do cycle 1 in PE and cycle 2 in agriculture, but we can do, and it, the years can cross though. Okay. Next slide. So new materials are going to be available in summer of 2025. We are currently running the field tests and for our cycle 2. And so we are still learning things. And so materials are still being updated as we speak. Assessment guides, templates, rubrics, as we are learning things in this pilot study, we are pushing them forward into the single subject and world language. Candidates will be able to register for the new single subject and world language versions beginning in the fall of 2025. We don't have specific dates. We hope to have the specific dates by the coordinator meetings that are going to happen in June, because we'll have a better idea of all the changes and items that are going to happen based on the field test that's happening right now. What changes are going to come, because like I said, we're in the process of studying this. We're in the process of receiving submissions. We will be conducting focus groups and other quantitative and qualitative measures to evaluate these changes, and the goal is to align across as much as possible. Next slide, please. And I think I'm turning this one over to you, Julie.
Thank you. Okay, so we wanted to start out with the big macro and kind of work our way down to the micro and talk about key updates for cycle 1 and 2. So some general updates that you can expect for the upcoming versions for cycle 1 and 2 is that we have changed how we have the rubrics placed within the guide. In the past, the rubrics have been at the end of the guide after all of the step-by-step instructions. We have now chunked and moved those rubrics to the end of each of the step-by-step instructions. So at the end of step 1 instructions, you'll see all of the rubrics that pertain to step 1, etc. At the end of step 2, you'll see all those rubrics. So that candidates, as they go through the guide, they will be able to really interact with the rubrics as they're doing the work, instead of it being at the end of the guide and being more of an afterthought. So we really wanted to make that happen. And we've had really good feedback throughout the field test with this change as well. You will see some best practice video links included in the guide, throughout the guide. So you'll see those that are linked to help candidates and further, give explanation and support. In rubric levels 4 and 5, instead of multiple constructs, you will see only one construct. So if they meet all of level 3 and they move on to level 4, there is one construct within level 4, and same for level 5. So that's a big change. We will talk about this throughout today's presentation, but we are removing the video annotation, and that will be replaced with commentary. And we'll talk about that as we get into the cycle 1 and 2 changes. And we will also share the flexibility in the number of videos that they can submit, as well as the length. So we'll talk about that as we kind of move into that a little bit more. Next slide. And for the purposes of this presentation, we just wanted to have a common set of terms as we go through. So for single subject, you will notice that it is content-specific lesson or lessons. For world language, it's content-specific lesson or lessons in the target language of instruction, or in the target language with English as appropriate. Now, we've also had some terminology changes as we are aligning with the CDE. So what was formerly referred to as informal assessment is now changed to formative assessment. So formative, we are referring to informal, and summative assessment was formerly referred to as formal assessment. So formative and summative, those are big terminology changes. Also, student assets. So throughout all of our guides going forward, we really wanted to use this common term. So we will be referring to student assets as cultural and or linguistic, as well as and or interests. So those are the student assets that they bring to the table. And that was formally referred to in the guide as cultural/linguistic assets and funds of knowledge. So we're trying to clarify that their assets can be cultural, or they can be linguistic, or they could be interest. So it could be any of those three. Okay, and what you're all, I'm sure, dying to know as we get into the changes. What are the changes to cycle 1? And we'll go through each of the 4 steps and really outline some of the changes you can expect to see, as well as, and we'll go through cycle 2 as well. I just want to reiterate, this is a draft. So some of the screenshots and some of the information that we are sharing is still in draft form, excuse me. So slight revisions might happen before actual publication this summer, but we are fairly confident that this is, good enough to share, and we want to support you in the field so that you can start planning for the coming year. So cycle 1, learning about students and planning instruction. So what to expect in step 1 planning. So here are some upcoming changes. So as you know, candidates created 2 learning goals. One was their content-specific learning goal, and the second one was their ELD learning goal. But this is a big shift for cycle 1 for single subject and world language. The second learning goal, they will create a related academic language learning goal. So we are shifting to move ELD to cycle 2 only. So ELD learning goals will be moved to cycle 2. In cycle 1, the focus will be on how they are developing that academic language for their students. And that is a big shift for this. Our second bullet. So we've removed that previous ELD requirement, and we're replacing it with the emphasis on developing content-related ALD in cycle 1. And finally, the changes, we've changed from the term class to group. We've learned that a lot of candidates, it depends on their clinical placement. They don't always have a class, but they can have a group of students to work with when they're going through their CalTPA. So to make it easier, we will be referring to the term group of students. I see a comment. Do they have to have an ELD standard at all if they have ELs? They do not have to refer to an ELD standard in cycle 1. That will be measured in cycle 2. And group has how many students? So group can be 2 or more. All right, our next slide, please. Changes for continuing on for step 1 planning. So let's talk about the 3 focus students. So for focus student 1, this is a little small for my screen. Sorry, I'm going to look at my larger screen. Even though I'm wearing glasses, you'd think I'd be able to read it. So for focus student 1, for single subject candidates, since we are removing that ELD change and we are focusing on academic language, the focus student will be a student who needs additional support with academic language development, and or it could be a student who needs support with English language development. It may be an English language learner, but it is not required. And for world language, this is a student who has a language learning need, such as a heritage language learner, bilingual, multilingual student, and needs additional support with their academic language development. For focus students 2 and 3, there are no significant changes from the previous versions. And as a reminder for all focus students, we have removed the criteria for social identity and developmental considerations. And as a reminder, the candidates must show how they're making those adaptations that build on those student assets, cultural and or linguistic and or their interests. So that is a major focus as they make those adaptations for their focus students, for all their focus students. Okay, upcoming changes to step 2, teach and assess. So as we mentioned at the beginning, some big changes are happening when it comes to step 2. So we're giving candidates more choice. So candidates have the option to submit between 1 to 3 video clips. This is a big change. They can submit 1 clip, they can submit 2 clips, they can submit 3 clips. It is candidate choice. The caveat is that all the videos cannot exceed 15 minutes. So, to be clear, they could submit 1 video clip that is 15 minutes. That is acceptable. They could submit 1 video clip that is 10 minutes and 2 other videos. One is 2 minutes and one is 1 minute. That's okay. That does not exceed the 15-minute total. Do they have to provide 15 total minutes? No, they don't. As long as the total does not exceed 15, that is okay. So between 1 and 3 clips for cycle 1. And then those candidates are submitting clips that reflect the following: active content-specific learning, content-specific academic language development, and how they are monitoring students' content-specific learning. So, candidates are tasked with engaging students in activities that are developmentally appropriate for higher order thinking. This means they are designing learning experiences that go beyond simple memorization and recall of facts. This is pushing kids and creating activities that are engaging and encouraging students to analyze and evaluate and create. The third bullet, video submissions will no longer be condition coded for edits. This is a big change. This is happening right now, and this is something that's being rolled out as we speak. So as you are very familiar, I'm sure, currently, or, in the past, candidates were condition coded if they made an edit. If there was a cut in between the clip, then that was condition coded because we could not see the full clip that would move around, the camera would shift. But right now, we are no longer condition coding for that. But we want to caution everyone, we don't want candidates going crazy with this. We don't really want the edits, actually. We want to be able to have that experience where you're sitting in their classroom, listening and watching naturally what's happening. And that's okay. We know that kids come and go to the bathroom, or the camera accidentally gets knocked over and put back up. A fire drill happens, whatever. We know that certain things happen in the classroom, and we would like to be there to experience exactly what's happening. So we would not encourage any edits, but we will not condition code for them. We don't want to see fancy titles. We don't want to see, oh, what did my colleague say? Like the Star Wars scrolling of words, something fancy, not like a TikTok. We don't want that. Just encourage your candidates to set up the camera, let the camera roll, and then let them select a clip. But if there is an edit, that will be okay. As long as, it doesn't interfere with what we're hearing and what we're seeing. If there's music playing over, the video, then we can't necessarily hear what's happening. So that would be a difficult one to score. And next, there's a change from annotations, what you're all familiar with. We're moving to commentary. This was actually very well received in the pilot and the field test. So this allows candidates to not have a limited number of words that they can type, and they can explain what we're watching, what we're seeing, what their instructional move was in the classroom. It just lets them highlight their instructional choices in a narrative or a video form. Again, another choice point for candidates. So that commentary, they can write it out. It can be all written. It can be verbal. They can hit the record button and talk to the camera. and explain their commentary if that is a better communication preference for them. Or if they teach an American Sign Language, they can use ASL as well. So lots of candidate choice points for cycle 2. Step 2, excuse me. Gosh, I knew I was going to do that. All right, next slide. And for steps 3 and 4 in cycle 1, there are no significant changes. Candidates continue to reflect and then apply what they have learned for future instruction. So in summary, that's a good highlight of the changes. We do have on the next slide the single subject cycle 1 evidence table. And I will do my best to look at that. Again, this is in draft form, but this highlights how the candidate with the guidance, and support from their cooperating teacher and or their supervising faculty, they gather and review that contextual information. They really get to know their students in their class, the group of students that they're working with. They select their 3 focus students. They develop one asset-based, UDL-focused, content-specific lesson that includes 2 learning goals. 1, their content-specific learning goal, and 2, their related academic language development learning goal. And that ALD is rather new. If that wasn't, much of a highlight before in your program, that is certainly a big change that is coming down the pipeline. And as you are designing your program and strengthening your coursework, that is something that we definitely encourage you to highlight with your candidates. And how will they really build upon the syntax and the vocabulary of that content lesson to really help the students really engage and better learn the material. Again, in step 1, they provide their rationale and they provide their key instructional resources. Step 2, they teach and record the whole lesson. This is where we get the most questions about is the video recording. I don't know if you feel the same way, programs, but candidates are encouraged to just record the whole lesson and then go back and select out their clips. Again, 1 to 3 clips totaling no more than 15 minutes. And then they provide their commentary, written, verbal, or ASL. In step 3, they reflect on the effectiveness of their lesson. What did they learn? And finally, they apply. I like to think of these 4 steps. I'd like to think of step 1 as like that pre-observation meeting. You're sitting down with your candidate. Tell me what you're going to teach. Tell me about your kids. Tell me about the lesson. Tell me about the adaptations you're making. And then, in step 2, that's the actual observation. In step 3 and 4, that's the debrief. What did you learn? How was it? What was effective? What were your challenges? And then what did you learn and how are you going to apply it moving forward? All right, the next slide, we have the World Language Cycle 1 draft evidence table as well. It is almost identical to what you just witnessed and just saw in single subject. But again, this is that they are doing their content-specific lesson in their target language or their target language with English as appropriate. And I'm sorry, I have not paid attention to the chat because I've just been chatting away, but I think our next slide, we're going to pause for questions. And I will certainly get to some of those questions. Let me just kind of back up and see what I've missed. I see Heather's kind of answered a few. Thank you. Ruby Lynn, thank you. You appreciate the flexibility. It's just a little odd to change that rule for 24-25 mid-year. Yes, it's a positive change. It was, it's an important change. It's something that has definitely been in the works, and we really wanted to implement this as soon as possible. This is also something that's come out of the RDI TPA work group, and so just kind of timing is, I know it's a little odd, but we are moving forward, and we're going to just see how this rolls out. Questions about cycle 1 so far? You can unmute if you need to.
Because you've made so first of all, thank you so much. I love the alignment. I can't tell you how much I love the alignment. And because we coordinate in our program, the LPA, I'm doing LPA, TPA, PK3 LPA, SPED LPA, SPED TPA, like we're doing all of the things.
Yep.
So the alignment's amazing. And I love the flexibilities. And so thank you for these changes. I just wanted to ask, because you're making it so much more flexible for candidates, do you anticipate the secondary passing standards staying, or is that something that should we anticipate that continuing to happen?
That's a great question. Well, the secondary passing standard is in statute. So we will, for cycle 1, cycle 2, we anticipate to really look at this and possibly go to the commission with an item in June about the passing standards. Will they remain the same or will they change? And we'll see what the commission decides to do at the June meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some other questions for cycle 1 before we move into cycle 2? And if
Julie, I have a question real quick. Sorry.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. I am wondering, the coordinator meetings for the TPA, are
Yes.
they still posted in PSD News? Are they, like, should I be keeping my eye on PSD News to see if the links are posted in there,
I
or
do
is
not
it?
think that they are posted currently in PSD News, but that is something that we could repost for those upcoming meetings. We'll also, towards the end of this presentation, be talking about our new listservs, and so that people can subscribe and we can kind of get more information out there sooner. So that's something that we could also be emailing out through the listserv for people who subscribe to that.
Yeah, we typically post when we are going to have our coordinator meetings. We had one in February and then we're going to have another one in June. And so
Yeah,
we'll
June.
try to get it into that PSD at least a month
Mhm.
before. And then I know that program coordinators were emailed to remind them of the coordinator meeting this because we had to move it because of issues with the wildfires and such. And we moved it to February this year. And so but like Julie said, we are putting together some new listservs to be able to shoot out more frequent information, streamlined. That PSD can get a little long sometimes.
Yes, more targeted information. So yes, thank you for a reminder. That's coming out in those program meetings will be in June, and we'll get those dates out probably about a month before.
There was another question that came up about the focus student 1 being an English learner with an emphasis on math adaptations. Do you want to take that, Julie?
Let me see. Let me kind of scroll back in the chat. Can you, if you see it, can you just?
Yeah, it's
I
so
can,
go ahead, Daryl. You want to go ahead?
yeah, I'll just ask. It's very brief. So
Okay.
subject 1 still has focus student 1 as an English learner with an emphasis on adaptations for math. That's still the same, correct? I noticed
So
this one.
a focus student 1 no longer is required to be an English learner.
Now, is that for multiple subject also?
It will be, yes. Yes, we are aligning with the same. We are aligning with our focus students for cycle 1. Sorry, let me back up. Let me say this. Sorry. Rewind. Okay. So in our alignment between multiple subject, single subject, and world language, we are removing the ELD requirement in cycle 1, and we are removing it in the multiple subjects math cycle. The math cycle for multiple subjects replaces cycle 1. And so those assessments will no longer have the ELD requirement. And the focus student, therefore, will be a child, a student who needs additional support with English language development, or it might be a child who needs support with their academic language development. But it does not have to be an English learner, but it can be as well.
Okay, that's a change from what the meeting said before.
That's a big change. Yes,
the meeting a month ago said that it was different. Just wanted clarification. Thanks a lot.
You're right, actually, Daryl, and that's something that we realized in our alignment, that by removing that ELD requirement, we are not making the focus student 1 be an English learner.
Thanks. Very cool.
It can be, yeah, sure. Thank you for letting me kind of get that out. All right, other questions? These are good questions.
There was another question that just came in about the commentary on video clips.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, and right now commentary can either be written, can
Mhm.
be video, or can be ASL.
Right. So you said, or is it video or just audio?
So, yeah.
It is video. We want to see the candidate. We want to see the candidate talking to the camera authentically, explaining some of their instructional choices, what we're seeing in the video. Here's where I adjusted my instruction. Here you'll notice this child in the blue shirt was doing this. I went over to them, da, da, da. So we want them talking authentically to the camera. And we do provide some further instructions in the assessment guide if the candidate chooses to go that verbal video route.
Are we ready for cycle 2?
I think so. Continue to put your questions in the chat. We can always come back to it at the end if you have a cycle 1 question.
So
right.
does that mean that there's a video or there's a response to each of the 3 active content, specific learning content, specific academic language, and monitoring student content, specific language for the video? Or is it one narrative and one commentary for all 3 of those?
It's one commentary for all the videos that they choose to submit. Or if they go the verbal video route, then they would create one video to submit that they are speaking to the camera and they're speaking about all of the videos that they uploaded.
So it's either one written or one video commentary, not one for each category.
Right. Not one for, they either pick, they pick which one it's going to be. It's either going to be written commentary about all of the videos that they uploaded, or they would go with the verbal route. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Sometimes we don't think of these things that could be confusing, so we appreciate the questions.
Okay, so changes to cycle 2, single subject and world language. The big change we talked about, right, was that ELD. So in previous years, candidates either could have a ELD goal or not. And if they didn't have ELD, they had ALD. That is what has changed here. You're going to plan, the candidates are going to plan 3 to 5 lessons that include at least 2 learning goals, 1 content specific standard base goal, and 1 integrated ELD using the content standards and ELD standards, even if they don't have designated ELD in their group. So they will plan for content and they will plan for English language development. Going forward in cycle 2, they will be selecting a focus student. A student who is either a district identified English learner, is fluent English proficient, or a heritage language speaker, or is multilingual. And for world language, this will be a student whose language learning need, heritage learner, bilingual, multilingual student. We are streamlining the learning segment. It went from a 20-page limit to no more than 5 pages. And we've removed the educational technology requirement and the student self-assessment requirement. So we are really trying to focus this this change. Next, oh, sorry, 5 pages per, apologies, 5 pages per lesson, not 5 pages total. That's a whole lot to try to put in there in 5 pages. That would have been, that'd be, apologies. Next slide, please. Cycle 2 changes. You change from class to group, like we said in cycle 1. And again, a group is more than 1 child. Streamline questions about formative or informal and summative formal assessments. We're no longer requiring copies of informal assessment, and the student self-assessment is going to be optional at this in the next iteration. Not required. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so some changes to step 2, teach and assess. There is going to be video clip choice between 1 to 4 clips up to 20 minutes Individual video clip length is the choice of the candidate, and they cannot exceed that 20 minutes. So assessors will watch the first 20 minutes that is submitted, and that will be what they review. Video edits will no longer be condition coded. A very common issue that we've seen is, like a candidate who starts in one section of the class teaching and then jumps to another. So those will no longer be condition coded. Again, we're not encouraging, fancy editing, but we're no longer going to make something unscorable because it is edited. The removal of the self-assessment and the educational technology video requirement is a big change. And so the videos are going to be structured differently. And we are also going to be changing to commentary. And when I first heard about this commentary thing, I was like, what the heck is that? Basically what it is, it's a video clip that a candidate chooses and then a Word document template where they will say at minute one, at minute 1, 5 seconds, the student in the blue shirt here was doing this. So they will have an opportunity just to type in a narrative format rather than having to, tag a piece of evidence in a video and a drop-down menu selecting a title and then, typing in that 1,000 characters. So it's going to be a little bit easier in my mind for candidates to be able to go through and just, put their video clip up and type their piece here. Or they can also say in just speak straight to camera, or have someone ask them questions and respond to them in a video commentary of what they did when they were teaching. Candidates can, commentary, written, verbal, ASL, whatever is the best way for that candidate to show what they know. We removed the analysis of informal and student self-assessment. It's now combined with the commentary, and there is one fewer rubric because we are changing from 5 to 4 rubrics. Ed tech and student self-assessment have been removed. Next slide, please. Cycle 2, step 3. There have been some big changes here. And the candidates are going to analyze and reflect on the summative assessment response for the group of students and the focus student. They've removed the whole class, like that table where the candidates had to say they scored, this many percentage over the met, exceeded, have not yet met. That table has been removed. And there has been adjusted language to focus on understandings, gaps in knowledge, and misconceptions, and remove the formal assessment response for 3 students. So they no longer have to submit student work for 3 students. Instead, they will submit their focus students' summative assessment response with a scored rubric or performance criteria and some actionable feedback. So how this candidate looked at their summative assessment and said, here's what we can do to move you forward. So that actionable feedback. So it's not 3, what is it? And have not met and exceeded the standard work samples. It's now 1 for their focus student who is an English learner. Next slide, please. Step 4, we've redefined reteach to focus on targeted intervention or individualized strategies to work towards meeting the content-specific and ELD learning goals. We've redefined extension to focus on deepening or advancing the learning in relation to the content-specific and ELD learning goals. So this was a challenge for candidates to figure out, well, am I going to, go back and do something differently because they didn't meet this requirement, or they did a really great job and here's the next space. So we want to just make sure we clearly define that for folks. We've streamlined the reteach or extension follow-up activity description, and there is an option for written, verbal, or ASL commentary in that component of step 4. Next slide, please. So again, here is a evidence table for the single subject version. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but you could take a look. The parts have been more like I said, streamlined. The contextual information, the learning segment template, apologies, 5 pages per lesson, maximum that aligns with the LPA, the written narrative, and the blank copy of the summative assessment and the rubric or performance criteria. The candidates have the choice of their video clips, 1 to 4 clips, no more than 20 minutes. We are no longer going to condition code for edits. Written commentary, video commentary, ASL commentary, that is the candidate's choice. And looking at, student summative assessment, their feedback, and the focus is on that actionable feedback, things that they can do to move them forward. And looking at step 4, we've really tried to streamline that and also move to a video clip with commentary in that space as well. Next slide, please. This is very similar. There is this. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read something bitty bitty on my screen too. Written narrative, contextual information again, learning segment template, same pieces here. Again, they'll be able to choose 1 to 4 clips, totaling no more than 20 minutes, written, verbal, or ASL commentary. The summative assessment with the scored material, no longer having 3 students set work samples, they'll have just 1 focus student, and the focus student for the world language candidates is someone that is a heritage speaker in the target language with English as appropriate, and the written narrative and reteach space has also been aligned to what is happening in the LPA. Next slide, please. I think we're at questions, and Heather has been hard at work looking over questions. Is there anything that we want to elevate for the group? Or anybody would like to put anything in the chat or unmute and ask? Stephen? Just
Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
So I noticed with all the changes, that's kind of mirroring, like you said, the field test. So for the material release, are we looking at around October like we are for the other programs?
We are actually hoping to have all materials, in August in the summer before we get going with the academic year. I'm
Okay.
not sure if we have the submission dates all lined up yet, because that's part of another work that we aren't necessary, but we are working to get watermark drafts out as soon as possible. And then and we had that brought up, right, in the multiple subjects. We talked about English learner being focus student 1, and then now the change. We're still learning things even through this pilot, but we are working very diligently to get these watermark drafts out as soon as possible for instructional planning, as we recognize that, we know syllabi are due, and we know that it's hard to change things once you get a contract out to a candidate. So yeah, we are shooting for, August, September, or somewhere in there, to be able to get solid documents out, but watermarks will come before that.
Right on. Thank you.
Sally?
Hi, Marissa, and all of the consultants. Thank you so much for putting on this information. I'm nodding all the way through. All of the changes are welcome information for my candidates. So real quick about registration. So now that we're in transition between the version 7 and the new one, so at registration for the fall, I'm guessing both options are going to be populated. So we're going to have to be very careful with our candidates on which ones to register. And then I also heard through the grapevine, I don't know if you can confirm this, that if a candidate in the future, say, registers for the wrong assessment, they're not going to have to pay the $150 again. I don't know if I heard the wrong information. Can you comment on this, please?
Sure. So yes, to your first point, programs will be the absolute first point of contact on advising candidates as to what they should register for. And when I was a program coordinator, we would all register together in class, and I would tell them what to click on, so that way they didn't register for the wrong thing. But it happens where someone goes to register for single subject art and they click on ag instead, and then they get the templates and they don't look any different and they don't realize that they submitted art for ag until they get a condition code. There is currently a process in place for someone, let's say, did the art ag thing, where they would get a condition code and a voucher when they'd be able to re-register and resubmit. That is currently happening right now for folks. It's a frustrating condition code to get when it's just a simple little error like that. And so that is something that has already been addressed and it is happening right now. So yes, that is current. And but again, there's still a delay, right? Because they get the submission on scoring day thinking they're going to get a score, and they get this voucher, and then they have to go back and redo for the next submission date. So if you can, as much as possible, work with your candidates, make sure, because I would get candidates that they didn't even know what program they were in, and I would be like, what kids are you teaching? Are they multiple? And you look out at the class, who are they? And candidates are still a little confused because some of this terminology for them is just not part of their vernacular. So I've made sure you're a multiple subjects candidate. You're teaching general education students. You might be in a class with other students who are teaching other fields, but please make sure you understand what your credential area is. And those drop down menus, and people are already with their credit card and anxiety, how that kind of goes. So please be that first point of contact and make sure your folks register for the right thing, and they can have fewer delays in getting their scores.
Okay, yeah, so for sure, we're already walking them through the registration process, but I do still, even with that, I still have just a small portion of them who might end up making the wrong selection. So how would they go about getting that voucher? Or is there a specific process for that?
It's automatically sent to them. Okay. It's part of the process. And so, and there is an automatic process for that through Pearson. And so if they are having any issues, they can contact the customer service department of Pearson, or you can contact us at the CalTPA email, or for any of you that are CalAPA, this is for the same thing. If they register for the wrong window, they get the same voucher.
Very good, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I think I'm seeing there's a question about the heritage speaker.
Yeah.
So the child can be, I believe, Julie, is that correct? They can be an English learner if they're for the focus student for world language.
For focus student for world language, cycle 1?
Yes, they could be multilingual.
Yeah, multilingual, bilingual, heritage language user.
Yeah.
All of those criteria are fine.
Yeah, for all of the focus students, just to clarify, there's never just a single choice for them. There's always options, so that it's a flexible enough assessment for candidates to complete it in whatever setting they might be in.
Right.
And then I think we addressed the submission date question. That's something that we're working on, and we'll make sure that those are shared as soon as we have those. I think that's everything so far. And we did talk about, I know samples submissions are definitely there's a strong desire to see those. And I do just want to clarify a little bit of the kind of the timeline and the expectation for that. So we are already talking about how to work on that with our team and how to expedite that process. We've talked about this in webinars before, where everything that is posted to the commission website has to be accessible to everybody. So we have to meet the ADA compliance standards. And so that is one of the things that is kind of that is what takes us a long time to post, especially with the videos or the additional materials that accompany candidate submissions, that we have to make sure that it's accessible for anyone who might be accessing a screen reader or who might require captioning or things like that. So we are making sure that we're working with our IT team and with our team internally to be ready to roll out what we can as soon as we can. Some of these versions are in field test form, and we're hopeful to be able to use potentially some of those as mid-range submissions as examples sooner rather than later. But for some of these, we're going to have to wait until scoring begins in order to locate a mid-range submission. So we do appreciate your patience with us while we work as quickly as we can to get you a quality mid-range submission to use as an example.
Thank you, Heather. I do see a question in the chat from Anna. Are we going to see an example of video annotations change? What you will see is the upcoming new template, the commentary template, which, thank you, Lori, I forgot to mention was as I was going through the cycle 1 changes. So moving from annotations to commentary, I know is a big shift, but the written template for commentary is new, but it allows the candidate to expand really on what they're doing in the classroom, what we can see in the video. It's helpful when they point out, look at this timestamp number, from 2 minutes, 30 seconds to 4 minutes, you'll see this or that. That's really helpful. But for student privacy reasons, we cannot put those videos up on our website. But you will see examples, as Heather mentioned, of once we get some sample submissions, once those start to roll in and we can make those accessible, you will see examples of those commentary.
And perhaps, I know we have at least one person, but I see a lot of familiar names on our attendee list today. If there's a few of you who have been participating in our pilots and field tests the last 2 years, who could maybe perhaps want to share your experience with having candidates engage in commentary instead of the annotations, and maybe kind of if you're willing to share your experience with that, that would be really great right now. Don't be shy.
I don't mind sharing a little bit. We were not part of the pilot, but we are part of the field test. My candidates love it. I'm just going to say it's an easy form. I don't have it in front of me, but there's about, well, this is cycle 2 LPA, both multiple subject and EDSP, and there's about 4 or 5 prompts that the candidates respond to. Each of those prompts go directly back to video criteria. So when you're teaching what what needs to be a part of the video, then you can go to the commentary and see the prompt or prompts that are directly related to it. And I would say one thing that I have noticed is just the decreased amount of stress that the candidates feel in regard to these annotations. I know especially cycle 1, although I haven't experienced it in cycle 1 yet, my cycle 1 candidates, because they haven't submitted, don't understand that they can annotate across all 4 videos, even though it says it in the assessment guide. There's just these things, there's so many stressors going on for them that this commentary form just seems to make so much more sense. So that's been our experience so far. And I would also just like to add, the video itself tends to be one of the main stressors for our candidates. So removing the annotations from it has been helpful.
Thank you for being willing to share. I appreciate that a lot.
I just want to second that. So I've worked with candidates in a variety of ways through the pilot and the field test for EdSped with the commentary. And I've heard the same global feedback from every candidate that's participated that was like, I had people from past years that were telling me that the annotations were so complicated and yada yada. And then they got to the commentary form paired with their video, and they were much more comfortable being able to talk freely, and then realizing, oh, well, I am talking about the video. I just need to go back and grab a timestamp rather than the complication of using an actual annotation and tagging. And they'd get all caught up in the procedural stuff and feel a lack of confidence in what they knew they had done because they were caught up by the procedure, rather than now this allows them to really dive in and talk about what their decision making was, why they did what they did, why they adjusted what they did without panicking about a procedural hiccup.
Thanks, Aubrey.
And I'd like to add to both of these comments as well as so the program that I work with, we participated in both the field test and the pilot for early childhood literacy and mathematics. And basically what everybody's talking about, how each of the commentary pieces matches the videos has been a real help for us in the program. And early childhood, as you know, doesn't have any experience with performance assessments at this point. And I think that they've felt the most comfortable being able to relay that information that through the commentary pieces about what they did in the video. And it's really awesome for me because I don't have to go, oh, make sure you go back to the rubric and make sure you got that point about UDL that wasn't mentioned in the prompts at all. So by the way, you got to check there too. So that was really nice, like how they match up. And I think going forward, for once it becomes operational, I think it will be a really awesome point to see how these folks are going to be providing commentary to their videos. And yeah, so I'm excited for it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I think just for us on the observational side and scoring, I have noticed that we get more in-depth responses out of candidates this way. And Beth, I noticed a couple times you referenced the similarity to CalTPA, and I'll just be really honest and admit that I'm not entirely familiar with their format or composition of the assessment, which I know might sound really odd being that we work in performance assessment, but we really are experts in the commissions model and don't really have experience with the other models. So I can't speak to that. So I apologize.
No, I work with both. And I'm also a lead assessor for CalTPA. So I live in the TPA world, and the commentaries that, if anybody's familiar with that TPA, I think you'll see that they're going to be very similar to that kind of process where the, like one prompt might be, how do you establish a positive learning environment with your students? And then candidates can kind of go through all of the video clips to pick out those moments that are relevant. So it's really taking the idea of the assessment, the annotation tool that ideally should have been a great way to deal with that, but created, a lot of confusion and had some limitations, and making it just a little more explicit. And so if anybody is familiar with that TPA, then I'm thinking, because I haven't seen, the revamped version, I'm still in version 7 on everything.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that it sounds like it's going to be a lot more like that, where I find candidates tend to, yes, be able to go through the flow of it a little more specifically. And as a result, their responses tend to be a little more deeply thought through than what we typically see in responses for annotations in the CalTPA, where they're just saying, I was standing in front of the class here, telling the students good morning, right? Or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So hopefully it'll give us a little more, revealing those inner thoughts a little more of why they're doing what they're doing.
Thanks.
Sally's got a question in the chat. Will there be changes to the remediation process for the new materials, say for the commentary section? No changes to the remediation process that is in program standard.
Maybe I can clarify my question a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So currently for the remediation, after having to converse with the coordinator or with the faculty, then the candidate can go back and either improve upon their old materials or to create brand new ones, so to speak. And so for the commentary section, then would that still apply? Would they have to start all over again if they had to retake it? Or would some of the commentary be recycled, so to speak?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I
Heather,
think,
do you agree? Yep, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it really depends on the submission and where their rubric scores led to a non-passing score. So we always say save all materials, and I think it really just depends. If their scores and plan are what led to the non-passing score, they probably could resubmit their commentary and have it be the same. But it's always so people are driven crazy by my answers sometimes because I say it depends for almost everything when we get asked a hypothetical question like this, because it really does. It just depends on the candidate. So, I mean, they could potentially submit the same commentary, but then maybe not also. So that probably isn't a very helpful answer. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I would say that when I would work with candidates to go through resubmission, we would look at, like I said, look at their scores. If they did a great job in their video and their annotations moving forward commentary, but they just stunk in their plan or stunk in their reflection or somewhere like that, then they could use those videos and that commentary again. But if that's where they had a hard time was in the video and the commentary, they're going to have to refilm and do something different because it didn't pass the first time. So that's where it comes to the point where, sitting down with someone, looking at their scores and taking an honest look at what happened. And it really does, like Heather said, depend on the candidate, what their submission looks like, and how you would advise them, going forward.
Okay, but hypothetically, parts of the commentary could stay, and then if they want to make any sort of improvements upon it. So anything that was regurgitated would not be dinged, right?
Well, it would be a new submission for a resubmission. So
Right.
it's not like they go back and compare them.
Right.
So if they did a great job in their video and they have some great commentary, then they don't have to do anything with that. They don't need to do any changes to it. They need to make changes to another part of the submission. But again, if their video was what was, not deemed passable, then that commentary would need to change because the video would need to change. So does that answer?
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're ready to move forward. How about you, Julie? I think
Thanks,
you're up
Marissa.
with resources. So yeah.
All right. Good questions. Thanks, everyone. So we really do want to help you prepare for the coming year. We know these are some big changes coming. We've really worked really hard, though, to streamline and align as well these assessments. So we are hopeful that this is helpful to you, but we have two other items that we put in the Google Drive that we have had some really great feedback on during the pilot and the field test. And that is these backward planning maps. So here's a little screenshot of an example of what's in the Google Drive. So this is for cycle 1 for single subject world language. What we've done is, this is just a suggestion. We are providing it to you as a Word document so that you can take it and tweak it and make it your own for what fits your program. We have spaced it out over 8 weeks, but for your program, you might do it in 4 weeks or 10 weeks. This is for you to use any way that is helpful to you. Programs found this helpful to kind of keep their candidates on track, and they would backwards map from the, suggested submission deadline. So we have these in the Google Drive for cycle 1 and cycle 2. We hope that you can use these. You do not have to follow it. Again, this is just a suggestion, but we did get some really great feedback from other programs about this. We're also linking some recorded webinars that we've had recently. These are not, the Digging Deepers are not yet linked. We're waiting on those from IT, but we've went ahead and linked our recent math literacy cycle update webinar, where we were updating many of the Ed Specialist and multiple subjects and PK3 programs about math and literacy cycle updates. So that is there for you as well. Our next slide, we've got some listservs to share with you. We have worked really hard with our IT department to get these listservs up and running for you. These will be linked when we put the presentation in the Google folder later today. As Heather mentioned, we will have a CalTPA news email list with targeted information. So as Carrie mentioned, when are those program coordinator lists dates coming out? We put them in PSD News, but we know that that's a long document. So those are things that we'll be sending out via the listserv. And if it doesn't apply to you, you can unsubscribe. But we would highly encourage everyone, over the next few days to kind of sign up so that we can start getting that targeted information for CalTPA, for the Ed Specialist TPA. If you are interested in what's happening with the literacy performance assessment, then you can sign up for that. And finally, the CalAPA for our administrators as well. And next, as a reminder, we've got office hours. We have program office hours on the first and third Thursdays of each month. So if that applies to you and you have a question, or you just want to kind of hang out and listen and see what questions other people are asking, fantastic. Please come. Those are linked in PSD News. That's from 10 to 10:30. And finally, we do offer candidate office hours. Candidates are often surprised that we offer office hours just for them. Those are held weekly on Wednesdays from 4:15 to 5. And the link is also in PSD News, so you can share that with your candidates. Again, they can just come and listen. It might spark something. It might spark a question. Or if they have a targeted question, they can come and ask us as well. Oh, someone's saying the links in PSD did not work. Well, we will make sure that they are in this guide, and we will double check PSD News as well. Thank you for letting us know. And finally, we just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for your attendance today. If you have any policy questions, you can email our CalTPA inbox at ctc@ca.gov. And if you have any technical questions, you can email evaluation systems at es-caltpa@pearson.com. And we will help you and we will get you going. And we look forward to sharing the new 25-26 version with you all in the coming months. And thank you for attending today. If you have any questions, please let us know.
Real quick, Julie, there was a good question about the passing score now that there is the elimination of one rubric. And that is something that is going to be addressed at the June commission meeting. They establish the passing standard, but given that there is a whole rubric less, the passing standard will be adjusted. And so we don't know what it's going to be adjusted to, but it will be adjusted and addressed at that June meeting.
So tune in for that.
Yes.
More to come on that.
And if you want to hold on, oh, Devin, I see your hand up. If you want to hold on for just a second, Amy, I can get you the folder from the last coordinator meeting. And for those of you who said that the links in PSD did not work, I will pull those for you right now. So if you want to give me just like 1 minute.
Devin, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you for all this information. Very helpful. And a lot of this